everyone. Welcome to this Being Human session, the first of two mini-series by David Robertson this year. On behalf of the Fellowship Beyond Numbers and the City Bible Forum, I'd like to welcome all of you here today, both in person and online. My name is Man Yoi, and during the day I work at Finity Consulting as an actuarial analyst, and I'm honored to serve as the MC today. Please sit back over the next 45 minutes, but keep your ears and your mind open because we're going to be hearing about a very interesting topic that is well worth reflecting on, what it means to be human. If you've been invited by someone and are wondering who we are, the Fellowship Beyond Numbers is an open network of people working in the numbers industry, including actuaries, accountants, and superannuation professionals. People with different faith positions and backgrounds are all welcome as long as you're open to engaging in the bigger questions of life, beyond numbers. Along with our quarterly events, we meet regularly as virtual small groups to support one another. And later in today's program, we'll hear a bit more from Martin and Julian about these small groups. But for now, let's meet our speaker, David Robertson.
It's very kind of you.
David, thanks for coming today and speaking for us. Before we begin, can you please share a little bit about yourself and how you came to be Sydney?
Okay. I'm from Scotland, which is the centre of the universe. And this, by the way, the weather we've got in Sydney just now is a Scottish summer. So don't complain about the cold. That's why I'm in a t-shirt. This is just great. I've been in Sydney for 3 years. I'm actually a Presbyterian pastor. And I came to Sydney because it was paradise, and since then we've had drought, bushfires, plague, you name it. So it's great, but that's who I am.
Wow, that's definitely very interesting.
Yeah.
And so what made you think about humanity and why this topic?
Well, because I'm a human being and you're a human being. I'm actually a historian. I'm interested in human history. I'm interested in what it means to be human. And when Martin asked about coming to you guys here, I just thought, well, one thing we've all got in common, we're all human, and we've got to be quite interested in it. So, and I've been reading different books, and I just thought it would be good to look at it in the perspective of what it means to be human and what the Bible says about that as well.
Great.
Okay.
We'll definitely look forward to that talk.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
No, thank you.
And I'd like to remind everyone that there'll be plenty of time for questions after David's presentation. And if you have any questions, you can just text them to the mobile number that is stuck there and also on the bar there. And they'll come directly to me. And it's also on the Zoom chat room right now. So before we start, let me just read a Bible passage from Psalm 8 before handing it over to David. So Psalm 8, Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies, to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens and the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them. You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet, all flocks and herds and the animals of the wild, the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea, all that swim in the paths of the seas. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Thanks, David.
Well, I'm actually am I in the right camera? Is that right? Yeah. So for the people who are online, yeah, nice to see you guys online. Well, I don't see you, but nice anyway to grasp you. I think Martin's going to sort me out here with all the technology. There was a day when I'd just go and just speak to people, but nice to see you guys online anyway. There will be opportunity for questions and comments. I'm a Presbyterian minister, so speaking for 15 minutes is a real difficulty for me. I love speaking to African congregations because they want you to talk for hours, and I can manage that. But we won't do that. 15 minutes. You guys have got to go back to work. The question of what a human being is, you think, oh, that's easy. You know, when those of you who are in life insurance, you're not insuring pets, are you? You're insuring human life. Oh, what is a human being? And you think it's easy, and then you start thinking about it. So we live in this crazy world just now where politicians, like in my country in Scotland, the First Minister of Scotland was asked, what is a woman? She said, I'd prefer not to answer that question. I go, you are a woman, and you're defending women's rights. How can you defend women's rights if you don't know what a woman is? Or what is a woman? What is a man? What is a human being? And are all human beings the same? You know, one of the concepts, one of the things in terms of racism is if you believe that a certain race is superior to others. If you looked at Darwin's Origin of the Species, it was originally subtitled The Superiority or the Advantage of Superior Races. Well, what does that mean? And how could anyone even say that? And how do you value someone's life? So is a 1-month-old baby, does that have more value than a 99-year-old person who's about to die? What about someone who's disabled? What about someone who, so how do we do all of that? Well, there's a writer called Yuval Noah Harari who's Israeli. He's certainly not a Christian. I'm not quoting him as that. He's written several books, but what I'm going to look at, one just now is called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and the other is called Homo Deus, which is how humans become like God, and that's the future of humanity. It was published in Hebrew in Israel in the year 2011, and since then it's sold millions. Lots of kind of people who are in charge of companies will have kind of Harari on their bookshelves so that people can see they're intelligent. I'm not convinced about Harari's idea, so I'm just going to tell you what he basically says. So he talks about humanity in 4 stages, 4 revolutions. The cognitive revolution, which he says began around 70,000 BC, when we developed imagination. The agricultural revolution around 10,000 BC, when, guess what, we developed agriculture. And by the way, it's extremely important. The development of wheat is huge in every single culture. And that's why what's going on in Ukraine just now, and all these prices are going to be rising because wheat is going to become more and more expensive. The unification of humankind, he calls it, around 34, basically, the time Jesus died. And he talks about the gradual consolidation of human political organizations towards one global empire. And then he talks about the scientific revolution around 1543 with the emergence of objective science. Now, these are very simplistic categories, not necessarily agree with them. There are people who are much more knowledgeable than I who would question them. But he basically says that the scientific revolution led to the dominance of Europe and European thought, in effect, throughout the world. I think there's a problem there because the scientific revolution also China and in the Arab countries as well. But nonetheless, he does have a point. He asks about what human beings are and says, today, are human beings happier than they've ever been? And the answer is probably no. And he ends it up by considering how modern technology may soon end the species as we know it. In other words, all this wonderful technology that's allowing those of you who are online to see me, we're probably all going to be taken over by robots at some point, and all human beings are going to die. That's kind of the cheerful way that he goes on about things. Now, what's he really saying in all of this? He's saying what makes human beings distinct in some ways is we have an ability to communicate, to conceptualize things, to invent things, and to question. He talks about imperialism and capitalism. He asks, really, what do we want to become? Now, I'm a little bit disturbed. I've got grandchildren, and I obviously had children to get grandchildren who were at school. And I used to get a little bit disturbed at school if my kids came back and they were told, you can be whatever you want to be. That's just rubbish. The song, I believe I can fly, I believe I can touch the sky. Well, no, you can't. We're how many floors up? 5 floors up. Jump out the window. I'm not recommending that. Thinking you can fly, you can believe it all you want, you can't fly. And there are things you might believe that you can't do. Some of you here and online as well are obviously incredibly intelligent with numbers. I couldn't do your job. I have no idea about numbers or insurance or anything like that. Maybe I could learn, but I'm probably a bit old to do that. But the point about it, that is that as human beings, there are limits to what it is to be human. There are things that make us different. Are we going to argue that we are just animals? We are animals. There's no question at all that we are animals. But are we just animals? Is there something that's different? So I grew up on a farm. And let me say this to you, that I have never in all my life observed rabbits having a discussion on philosophy or pigs having a prayer meeting. And you see some terrible things within nature, but what we wouldn't hold people responsible. So if a dog attacks somebody, would you take the dog to court? Well, no. There's a wonderful story. I love this story, and this is actually true. This happened in Kentucky in America in the 19th century. There's a town which they now call, under the wee headline underneath of the name, I can't remember the name, somethingville, the town that hung Mary the elephant. And what happened was Mary was part of a circus. She was an elephant, and she trampled on her owner and killed him. So the town decided to try her, and the elephant was found guilty of murder. So they wanted to hang her, but it's kind of difficult to hang an elephant. So they had to get a big chain and a crane and everything like that. And it's a ridiculous story. We don't hold animals morally culpable, but we do hold human beings morally culpable. There's another aspect of humanity as well. More than any other animal, we master our surroundings. If you look at all around here, I mean, there are human beings who say we should go back to nature. Nobody really wants to do that. The people who I hear saying that are people who tend to be live in nice, very nice houses, drive nice cars, and they would never give up any of the things that they've got for that. Going back to nature sounds nice until you live in nature. Human beings have been able to develop and create things and with all the technological stuff as well. We've increased food production, for example. We've built cities, we've established empires, we've created trade networks. Have we increased or decreased the amount of suffering? When you think about science, science is a wonderful thing, but you can use science for good or bad. Science is morally neutral. You can split the atom, you can use it to create electricity to heat people, or you can use it to create a bomb to kill people. This technology that we've got, you can be using for a good purpose. What better purpose than to be watching me right now? Or you can watch degrading pornography or something. You can use it to abuse people. So we as human beings are moral beings. We're technological beings. We're physical beings. We're emotional beings. And I would argue that we're spiritual beings. Now, Harari does not argue that. I would argue that one of the things that makes us distinctive is not just that we've evolved a little bit differently or that we've bigger brains, but I would argue one of the things that makes us human is that we are made in the image of God. Harari suggests in his book, and it's really his second book in particular, he says that we've basically got rid of famine, war, and plague. Now, he wrote this before COVID, and things have kind of changed a bit since then. We haven't. We've just lived in an era in human history in the West where, for the first time in human history, we haven't really lived with plague, not since the Spanish flu of 1918. And all we've done with COVID is go back to normal. In fact, go back to where most countries in the world have been out with the West. So it's interesting, we as human beings, for example, just again using the science thing, we can create science labs which enable us to study disease, which enable us to help combat that disease, or, as in the case which is highly likely in COVID with the lab at Wuhan, to have a mistake and suddenly it gets released. Or this seems to me particularly insane. Smallpox has been eradicated, but there are scientists now trying to develop stronger strains of smallpox so they can study it. And you're thinking, what could possibly go wrong? Haven't we learned our lesson? And I think that there's just this complexity of what humanity actually is. Now, it's a kind of, that's an overview of his book. I just wanted to make some comments before we finish out what a Christian perspective of what humanity is. I once did a series of lectures that lasted 5 hours, so let's see if we can do them in 5 minutes, just like that. I mean, we're human beings. So from a Christian perspective, we say we're made in the image of God. What does that mean? God doesn't have a human body. He's a spirit. So what does it mean? It means that we are moral beings. There's a phrase we talk about: knowledge, righteousness, holiness. What that means is we are moral beings. We know the difference between right and wrong. If you don't, you're basically a psychopath. We know things, something, and that's across all human cultures. Now, there may be societal distinctions within that, but human beings have a built-in sense, a conscience of what is right and wrong. We're moral beings. We are communicative beings. We do talk with one another, and we do think. We don't just, I mean, we've just had, for those of you online, sorry about this, guys, but we've just had some pizza, and there's plenty left, and if you want to come around, you can have some. But we communicate, we kind of eat together, we're moral beings, but we don't just go by our appetites. Virtually all the animals I've ever worked with go by their appetites. They need to be fed, they want to have sex, and sometimes they want to fight, and they go by their appetites. Human beings, we have appetites, but the distinction about us is we can overcome our appetites, and therefore I will not be going and having more pizza right now. So we are moral beings, we are thoughtful beings, we are communicative beings, and we are certainly emotional beings. Now, I would argue that animals are also emotional to some degree. I've seen that. You can see certain animals that do have affection for you. Never cats. Cats are evil. Sorry, no, I shouldn't. That's probably the most controversial thing I'll ever say. No, cats are lovely. If you love cats, then that's fine. But animals can be emotional, but not in the sense of we cognitively think through things. We think about meaning, and that's because I think ultimately we are made in the image of God. We are spiritual beings. One of the things that disturbs me a lot, or did disturb me, was I grew up in a culture where I didn't really see a lot of death, and then the first time I saw a dead person, I was just, wow. And I remember when I became a minister, and somebody would die, and they would say, "Can we go, and see the coffin, the open coffin is?" And then, a young person would say, "No, that's not my dad. It looks like my dad, but it's not my dad. He's not there." And I would say, "Exactly, he's not there, but it's his body. What's the difference? Is it just the, electrons in his head? What makes the difference?" And there's something about us that we are physical, we're mental, intellectual, emotional, and we are also spiritual beings. And ultimately, I think that's where equality comes from. We're all equal because we're all made in the image of God, male and female, whatever race, whatever background we come from. So when I'm asking the question, what is a human being? I'm saying a human being is a creature that is made in the image of God and is designed for something more than just being here on this earth, and then that's it. There's a philosopher, Bertrand Russell, who says that you are just a blob of carbon floating from one meaningless existence to another. Well, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the people here, and you online, I can't see you, but I'm sure it's the same. I'm looking at the people here, and I'm saying, I'm sorry, you're not just a blob of carbon. If you were, fine. What does it matter if somebody kills you? It might matter to you immediately, but then you'd be dead. Those around you, it might matter, but in the greater cause of humanity, why not just, kill more people? And there are people who think like that. But because we're different, because there's something sacred about humanity, because there's something special, because there's something unique. So I'll finish with this. I worked for an organisation for a while in Scotland as a volunteer for what was called the Scottish Spastics Council. Now, they wouldn't be called that now because that would not be a politically correct term. So basically, people who were very severely disabled. mentally and physically disabled. And you people, I remember one man who was 23 years old, and he was shriveled up in a ball. He was so physically disabled and couldn't speak or anything like that. And you could place him. He would just fit on a bed that size. And I remember trying to talk to him and various things, and he used a thing called the bliss board. And as I got to know him, I realized that with all his physical and mental disability, he was a rather special human being. And I think that is a very, very important thing in terms of how we treat people. Ultimately, there's nobody that's scum. Ultimately, we're all made in the image of God. So I'm going to leave it there, and I think you're going to say something, and then we might have some questions. If people have got questions, you can send them online, or you guys here can ask them.
Thanks, David. That was extremely interesting and it's given us a lot to think about. So if you have any questions, please text them to the mobile number that's in the chat box on Zoom, or also the number that's on the poll over there and also in front of you. And we can ask those questions to David later. But for now, can I please ask Martin and Julian to unmute yourselves so that you can tell us a little bit about Fellowship Beyond Numbers Hope Groups? Yes.
Hello. Hi, my name is Martin. It's great to see you all. I work for City Bible Forum. I'm the guy who keeps sending you all these messages and emails. So as Minui briefly mentioned earlier, we Fellowship Beyond Numbers. It's a network of people in the numbers industry who are keen to support one another. And just wanted to tell you that one of the ways in which we do that is by catching up virtually during lunchtime as a small group. We call them a hope group. And so I thought I'd invite Julian to share his experience of being in a hope group. So Julian, are you online? Can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
here.
I can hear you all right. The last time we had a chat, we were just a few days apart from being isolated because of our COVID. How are you feeling? Are you out of your COVID isolation now?
Yeah, I'm officially out today because last night I got tested again and it's negative, thank God, but still coughing. Still recovering, but yeah, things are getting better. So
That's good. Good to know.
Yeah.
So maybe can I start off by asking you to perhaps introduce yourself? What do you do for work and where do you work?
Sure. Hi everyone. So my name is Julian, and thank you for this opportunity to share about Hope Group. So I'm currently working as an accountant at Mport and Spring Day, a company group which focuses on well-being, fitness, and 3D body measurements. The company itself is based in Crossness or near St. Leonard, but we halfly working at home and like what I'm doing today, and also we go to the office probably 2 to 3 days a week. So yeah.
Thanks Julian. Petra, we've been meeting up virtually. We haven't seen each other in person for a while. Tell us a little bit about this Hope Group. So you've been coming along to this Hope Group for some time. What do you do when people actually catch up virtually as a Hope Group?
So yeah, so Hope Group itself is, so we meet every 2 weeks for around 40 minutes at lunchtime. So it's basically it's a small group where we can catch up with one another. We have this online community where we share things about things that we are thankful for, and also things that we find challenging in our lives. And also we have time to read a Bible passage about Jesus, about his story, about his teachings and what it means to us. And I feel that it is a very safe and open environment for us to share about what we think about the story. And also if we have any questions, it's also a very relaxed and non-judgmental setting that we can share and also ask questions about the Bible passage that we read. So yeah, that's
awesome. Yeah, and you know, working from home has had many challenges and present many challenges for a lot of people. Has the Hope Group been able to support you in any way in the last 6 months that you've been part of? Did you want to maybe share a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, obviously. So first of all, thanks so much, Martin, for inviting me to join like around 6 months ago. So it's been a blessing to me. It's been a support to me as an online community. and also a place where I can share a little bit about myself, and also especially the things that I should be thankful for. So like what you said, working from home and isolated from people, we tend to focus more on problems, and I find it's actually more challenging to share about the things that we should be thankful for. So with this community, with this Hope group, so it's a good exercise for us to think about the things for our well-being and to be thankful for that. And apart from that, it is also a place where we can listen to one another, to their stories, and to be given a chance to encourage one another and be encouraged by the story and teaching about Jesus. And when I'm feeling down or worried about work and life, so basically I find it really helpful to listen to and be reminded again about the story of Jesus that I often forgot. It reminds me about the hope that I have in my life and that I often forget in the midst of challenges that we face every day. So yeah, so that's a good support to me.
Thanks so much, Julian, for your honest answers. I hope you can join Julian, myself, and other people by signing up for Hope groups. Currently, we're running 2 lunchtime Hope groups, one on Thursday and the other on Friday. And we're hoping to add more groups during other weekdays. So please let us know by signing up. You'll have a paper form if you're attending in person, and there's a link being copied and pasted into the chat room now if you're joining us online. So we'd love to see you join one of our Hope groups and love to keep catching up. Over to you, Minui.
One question here for David. So the question is, what would you say to the engineers and scientists out there who are looking to build artificial intelligence and other technologies to help preserve mankind? Should they stop?
Well, if you're building artificial intelligence to preserve mankind, of course you should stop, because if you're doing it to replace mankind, if you're building a computer so that we don't have to employ actuaries anymore, then fair enough. But sorry, no. But I mean, if we can basically you create things. You can create things to help and to aid, but the idea that we can create human beings, that's an absurd idea. If we are just a series of chemicals, if we are just robots, then if we are just sophisticated robots, then yes, you could do that. But my argument is that we are not just robots, that we are more than that. So I know people who are very much involved in AI, and they're saying they're nowhere near being able to get anything near as sophisticated as the human brain. So, but it's not just the brain. We're not just chemicals. I remember saying to a postdoc chemist, do you believe that everything that we do, say, or feel is ultimately chemical? And she said, yes. And I said, do you live like that? She said, oh, no, I couldn't live like that. So if you've got a philosophy that you can't live by, and we are chemicals. There's no question we are chemicals. And we are connected, neurons and all the rest of it. But the notion that we are just that, that doesn't make sense. And sorry, I'm not going to marry a robot. I don't know, have you ever seen a film? There's a film called The Stepford Wives. The old version of it was brilliant. The newer version isn't so good. But The Stepford Wives is hilarious because it's basically this bunch of misogynistic men who don't like the fact that women talk back to them. So they create their own women as robots who'll do whatever they say, and they look perfect and they dress perfect and they're like slaves, really. But they're just robots. It's actually a very, very good film. Horrific, but I'm sorry, none of us here are robots. So if you're trying to create a human robot, you're not going to succeed.
What was the film again? The name of the film?
The Stepford Wives. Stepford Wives. Yeah. So it's just, it was incredible. It was these men's idea of what a perfect woman was. Someone who doesn't talk back. And and I'm going, that's just an absolute nightmare. I like human beings to be human. That's one of the, again, for those of you who are involved in insurance, you must be aware of this, of course, that you can insure all different kinds of things, but how do you insure human behavior? It's quite difficult to work out what humans are actually going to do because we're so unpredictable in so many ways. In some ways, we're predictable. In other ways, we're not. So.
Thanks, David.
No.
We've also got another question here, quite interesting. which is about whether there's any link between what you have just been saying and the view that our humanity is defined by our sexuality.
Yeah, there's a kind of link. Sexuality as an identity is a very strange thing. It's a new phenomenon. So up until the late 19th century, early 20th century, people would have thought that was just really daft, because sexuality was not defined by identity, or identity rather was not defined by sexuality. And it also depends what you mean by sexuality. If you mean sex, then that's. I know people see it's weird. People now want to change all of this, but your sex is a biological thing. I mean, men and women are different, and I can't believe that people seriously argue that they're not. But if you went to a hospital and it's XX or XY, there are some. If you were a female and you were treated like a male, you could be in real trouble. So there are. It's not just a question, forgive me for being crude, it's not just a question of genitals, nor is it just a question of how you've been brought up in society. It's a question of that, and the Bible puts it very clearly, just says God made us male and female. That's also incidentally true of most species, male and female, not all. But so I think defining yourself, and it's not even by sex, it's by sexuality. And what do they mean by sexuality? They mean the level of sexual attraction you have for someone or even something. And again, that just seems a really weird way to define yourself. I used to do a lot of debates and stuff, and on this kind of issue. And sometimes someone would come up after me and say, "Hi, my name is John, and I'm gay." And I would go, "My name is David, and I'm not. So I guess we're never going to get it on." And he would, "What?" I said, well, why did you say that? Why would you define yourself in that way? Why would I care? Why would, so this, and here's part of the confusion. I think as humanity's lost its belief in God, at least in the Western world, not in most other parts of the world, G.K. Chesterton said, if you lose your belief in God, you end up losing your belief in humanity. We are now struggling to say, well, what actually is a human being? Well, the most basic definition, a man is a male adult human, and a woman is a female adult human. These are words that some politicians now wouldn't dare say because somehow they think it's wrong. It's just basic biological and scientific fact. So I do think that there's a confusion that arises out of all of this that causes people to think, well, what's a human being anyway? And why would you define yourself by sexuality? It may be, even if you accept it exists as an identity, is that what makes the most important thing? I mean, I personally, I just treat all people the same. They're human beings. I really don't care in that area. But anyway, sorry, that's a huge question. That's two huge questions. It's a lunchtime and I've just had pizza. Come on. Has anyone got an easy one?
Any easy questions? Please send them through.
Or you guys are here. If you want to say anything, please feel free.
You guys have any questions, you guys can put it right now.
You're sitting here looking thoughtful. It's like an auction, isn't it? When someone goes or scratches their ear. All right. So when you're looking thoughtful, I'm going, wait, go ahead, what's your question? No. Okay.
I have one question here. So the way human beings treat one another, such as in the Ukrainian war, seems remotely close to what the psalmist has envisioned in Psalm 8, that God made humanity a little lower than the angels and crowned with glory and honor. Mm-hmm. So has our pride and privilege now corrupted us? Where have things gone wrong?
Oh yes, we've become corrupt, and that's why we use the term inhuman. So I think that what's happening in Ukraine is actually fairly normal for human beings. And never mind Ukraine. I could take you to plenty of homes or areas around here where you will see violence, you'll see abuse, you'll see all kinds of things. Because Solzhenitsyn, the Russian writer, said the dividing line between good and evil goes through the middle of every human heart. And one of the reasons I became a Christian was I studied Nazi Germany. And I came to the conclusion that given certain circumstances and so on, I could have ended up being a Nazi. That they were human, in other words. And I came to realize there was something fundamentally flawed with humanity. So maybe I didn't say that. This is a good question to raise this. There's something inherently dignified about humanity and something very good, but there's also something inherently flawed within each human being, which needs to be redeemed, if you like. It needs to be saved. And it's Shakespeare, though, or what may man within him hide, though angel on the outward side. There are people who just look wonderful, and they look great, and they look very angelic, and then you discover they're just evil monsters. And I just think my basic philosophy is that human beings are messed up. I was a pastor in a church, and I came to a conclusion that, I once said to my wife, I think everyone in this church is just odd. I said, I'm the only sane person. And that made me odd. So and then I just said, no, we're all messed up people. I just don't believe people who say they live a perfect life and they're perfectly happy and there's nothing ever wrong. I just go, yeah, okay. I just don't believe you. I think we're all messed up, but I think we've all got that enormous potential as well. And I don't believe that anyone is irredeemable. In other words, I don't think I could ever just say, right, no, that person, never. So I don't know. I mean, I think it helps you in your life to have a realistic view of humanity, but not a hopeless view of humanity, is what I would say. Okay, are we done, or you got one more?
Any last burning questions? Or that might be all the questions for today at the moment.
Yeah, it's a huge. It is a massive thing, and it's a massive thing, to be honest. To be, we don't spend all our lives going around, I wonder who I am. There's some of us. I mean, I had a lot of teenage angst at one point, and some of us, you do. There's various things. Most of us just want to get through the day, but it's still good to know that you're a human being and how you should treat other human beings. And I think perhaps maybe I can finish with this. There was only one human being who was perfect, and that was Jesus. He, as God, came to be the perfect human being to rescue humanity. That was the point of him coming. And that certainly is something that gives me great hope. So human beings are complicated and simple. We're beautiful and ugly. We're good and bad. We're just all over the place. And yet, I do think there's tremendous hope. And it's been lovely being with human beings here. And sorry, what was your name again? Manjoy. That's a wonderful. Does it have a meaning, or?
It means intelligent.
It means intelligent. Okay, all right. You're very appropriately named. Your parents were prophets. Mine. What does mine? My name means beloved of God, and then Andrew. My name is David Andrew, and it means strong man. So I'm afraid the second part was false, but the first part I hope is right. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, and thanks, guys, online.
And before you go, one last thing for you. So this is the first part of our talk by you, and there will be another talk coming out in September, on the 9th of September. So can you please share a little bit about this future of humanity talk, a little bit of spoiler, so that
okay.
look forward to it?
Well, it's called Homo Deus. So Harari basically says that we're going to become like God, or we're going to become gods, and that's whoever asked the question about AI and stuff. There's a huge part in that. I think. I mean, I was at the cathedral down here, and I met some young people, and they were like, I felt so sorry for them, because they were saying the world's going to end in 10 years. And I'm going, no, it's not. And, we can't ever have any children. And I was just, So is there any hope for humanity? Is there any future? And that's what we're going to look at. And we'll look at what Harari says, and then I would like to give a more biblical, which is at one and the same time more realistic, but also more optimistic than most people today. So that's what we're going to look at.
Great. Thank you so much, David.
No, thank you.
We're definitely going to look forward to that. Very relevant. And so I hope David has given us all plenty to think about. And on behalf of everyone at Fellowship Islanders, thank you, David, for speaking with us today.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to be with such intelligent human beings.
And we also thank Martin and Julian for sharing with us about their hope groups and how that has been helpful for them. And as Martin mentioned, if any of you are interested in joining these hope groups to support one another and create a sense of hope by reflecting on the life of Jesus, please remember to fill out the sign-up sheet for joining the hope group, which I think is in the forms in the seats and also on the Zoom link. And on behalf of the Fellowship Beyond Numbers and the City Bible Forum, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event on Friday, the 9th of September. And if you have time, feel free to stay back and have a chat. And also finish off all the lovely pizza that's here as
Yes.
well. Thank you, everyone.